Sit straight comfortably with a straight spine, either in Vajrasana or in Sukhasana. Gently close your eyes. Shift your eye gaze to the third eye or the center of the eyebrows, so referred to as Jyotishmati. Let's try to connect to the light of awareness within us. We'll begin today's session with an opening chant. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. We seek blessings to be nourished together. We seek blessings to make sure that we give our 100% effort in our perception today. We make sure that there is no hatred or competition amongst us, and let there be peace everywhere. And let's also offer our salutations to Maharishi Patanjali. Yogena chittasya padena vacha malam shariram cha vaidyakena vyopakarotam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi. The Maharishi Sage Patanjali, who gave us the yoga system to make our mind into a tranquil state, and also gave us the speech, the grammar for the speech in Sanskrit, and also the inventor of Ayurveda for that Sage Patanjali. We offer our salutations, Anjali Ranatosmi. And then let's begin today's Patanjali Yoga Sutra study. So let me actually, let me see if I can stand up. I think this is a good way to. So what we've done last week is we introduced the Astavangani, the 8 limbs of yoga path. Patanjali in the Yoga Sutras, he defined 3 streams of yoga. The first one is for advanced practitioners, which is the Samadhi Pada, which is those advanced practitioners can directly get into Samadhi state. And then for many others, Patanjali also defined the Ashtanga Yoga, which is a 8-limbed, the synchronous practice. And what Patanjali also made a bold claim that by practicing this, we can actually completely eliminate all the suffering. Heyam dukkam anagatam. And then Patanjali defined the 8-limb, the yoga system as the 8 limbs are defined as yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhayo, astavangani. So what we need to do is just like how we have the different limbs for our body, and they all grow synchronously within our body. We need to make sure that we are nurturing all these 8 limbs. It's not like we only focus on just the asanas or the pranayama or different limbs, but rather one thing feeds into the other, and that's how we become a complete well-balanced yogi. And we'll figure it out. In fact, the first 2 limbs is what we started last week, the yama and the niyama principles. And this is, so what we're going to do today is we're going to continue our study of the remaining yama principles. And then what we'll also do is we'll, depending on the time, we'll also get into the niyamas. So the first, the limb of the Ashtanga Yoga. And before I do that, one of the biggest things what Patanjali said is people who practice this 8-limbed yoga practice, they'll get 3 benefits. One is Ashuddhikshe, all the impurities will be eliminated. Jnana Deeptihi, they will connect the light of awareness, and then they will be radiating that light of self from in all their actions and thoughts. And then Aviveka Kyatehe. So that means they will get the complete discriminated knowledge of who we are. We are that Nitya Suchi Sukha Atma. So that is what we cover. And then with respect to the Yama principles, there are 5. Yama means control. We use the word Yama in so many ways. Yama, Pranayama, Samyama. Yama is control. The first limb in the 8-limb yoga system is how do we control our behaviors while we are interacting with others in the society, while we are interacting with Prakriti, which is other people and the nature. And then the Niyama is the self-control. What is the discipline that we impose upon ourselves? How do we conduct ourselves? Is the second limb. And then we'll talk about samyama, which is actually the ultimate control or the total control, which is the recipe for excellence, which is perhaps the most hidden secret, from the yoga system. So we'll cover that, later. So what we did is, the yama is how do we conduct, towards others. It's defined by 5 principles: ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. So we talked about yama, the ahimsa, and one of the biggest benefits that we get from ahimsa is ahimsa pratisthayam. The superpower that we are going to get by practicing ahimsa is that we are going to influence the environment around us, the people around us and the nature around us, to give up violence. So the ahimsa pratisthayam tatsannidau vairatyaga. Tatsannidau vairatyaga. So the environment around us becomes non-violent, and that is one of the superpowers that we will build upon ourselves when we start practicing the yama. And we have seen that, like Mahatma Gandhi, Lincoln, and Buddha, and Mahavira. In fact, there was a saying that, wherever there is Mahavira that was around, even the thorns used to bend down, apparently. And that's how the level of influence that he had. And again, anytime when we are talking about the yama niyama principles, it's not just about our physical actions. It's a trikarana shuddhi, manasa, vacha, karana. Make sure that our thoughts have non-violence, and then our words have non-violence, and our actions have non-violence. And then there is one other longest, sutra that we talked, which is that the acts of violence could be in any role: vitarka hinsadaya, krutakarita anumodita, lobha krodha moha purvaka, mrudumadhyadi matra, dukkhananta phala, dukkha jnanananta phala iti pratipaksha bhavanam. So in other words, whatever the role of violence that you play, whether you are the drug perpetrator, or you are the facilitator, or the reason, or you're just witnessing and enjoying the acts of violence around you, driven by either greed or lust or anger, in whatever the intensity, whether it is medium, light, medium, or heavy intensity, the end result is dukkha jnanananta phala, ajnanam and dukkham. Suffering, unlimited suffering, and unlimited ignorance will be dawned upon us. So I think, in some sense, we can see that those effects in the contemporary society today. People that are taking with the violence, not only they are inflicting so much pain for themselves, but also inflicting so much pain for the people around us. So we as yogis, or the people who are in the path of yoga, we have the superpower to actually reduce the violence, to influence, to become more and more people to practice non-violence. So that's a quick summary of what we covered last week. Any questions or comments? So let's move on to the next one, which is the satya. Satya is what Patanjali defined the power of the satya is satya pratisthayam kriya phalashayatvam. This is another great superpower. People who are established in truth, and again, manasa vacha karmana, speaking truth in their thoughts and actions, and then in their words, then kriya phalashayatvam. Whatever they think, whatever they say, it becomes real. It becomes true. And this is a great superpower, and it actually, what I say is, it comes across. It's actually a big responsibility. Being truthful is one part of it, but then once you are established in truth, then whatever you wish, whatever you think, that actually becomes true. And we have seen this in some of our old ancient, mythological stories, like, all these munis and, who are established in truth, whatever they wished, whatever the boon or the curse that they gave, it actually became a reality. So, and we can actually see this happening too. We can, once you're established in being truthful, your intuition grows. When you're established in yoga and being truthful, your intuition grows. And the intuition, whatever you think, it actually becomes a reality. In fact, we've done a lot of scientific studies too. Yesterday, we were discussing some of the talks from, Dr. Joe, where basically says, like, whatever you conceive in your mind, that actually can become a reality. But the precursor to all that stuff is you just need to be truthful. If you're in conflict, what you say versus what you think, if they are not in a harmony, then you're negating yourself. The power that you're generating from your thought and your actions, they're negating each other. So nothing actually becomes a reality or a manifestation. So why is this a big responsibility? Because once you're established in the truth, you only done 50% of the job. And the next part is we have to inculcate positive thinking. Because once you're established in truth, and if you have any negative thoughts, they will also they will also manifest. So we need to start building positive thinking for ourselves and for the people around us. And in fact, in some of my yoga lectures for the kids, this is something that I will always tell them, because kids, when they are innocent, they are almost established in truth. But if they have a sense of doubt, like for example, when they are trying to get into an exam, or if they're trying to get into a challenging situation, but if they start doubting themselves, I don't know whether I'm going to succeed here, whether I'm going to do well here, then what is like, there is a possibility that that might become true. So one thing that we always need to do is make sure that we train and teach everybody to become power of positive thinking. And it's okay if they're not established in truth, then nothing matters. It's a lost cause anyway. But people who are in the path of the yoga, people who are making a concerted effort to practice being truthful, we need to make sure that we always invite only positive thinking for ourselves and for the people around us. Any thoughts or comments from anyone?
I don't think every thought we think is going to manifest. There has to be an emotional part of it. It needs to be attached to the.
You have a meaning.
They say, "Okay, I get good thoughts." Good. You have to have the emotional side of it. Only then you can manifest.
True.
Yeah, and you have to feel the living in it than a lack of it. So I think more than a thought, along with thought, it's the emotion we attach to it, and the abundance we feel with that, all as if we already have. I think that's what Joe Dispenza mainly talks about.
Yeah, it's a wonderful thing. In fact, you have to have a meaning. You have to connect with what the purpose and the finer details that you chisel. And in fact, that's what we train, right? People in the entrepreneurship path. Many of them, we let our thoughts to just, float at the subconscious level. We don't actually concretize them. So it's almost like, I sometimes tell people, if you want to achieve something, you have to draw, you have to have this, the paintbrush, start, clearing the canvas, and then make the finest of strokes, and try to realize that painting, whatever you're trying to do, visualize that in your mind. The finer the details that you have, the more you're telling it to the universe that, this is what I want to happen. I think that's also perhaps the theory of alchemist, right? When your intention is so strong, and when your level of sankalpa, the visualization, and you connect to the meaning and the purpose of why you're trying to do, and when that sankalpa is so strong, then that becomes a reality. But of course, all that stuff begins from you being in harmony, you being in truthful first, with your own self. Satya pratisthayam kriya phalashrayatvam. So, and the biggest responsibility that comes from here is make sure that we are also being very positive in our thoughts. That's another greatest thing. I mean, there is a small digression here. There's a funny episode. This happened, I think, about 6 months ago. I was explaining this Patanjali Yoga Sutras to my family, my mom and some of my family members in Telugu. And then we covered the sutra. And then, my mom, particularly after my dad passed away, she always feels alone. And sometimes she gets into this sad state of, I don't know why it happened to me. Why did, the God made me this, and why am I suffering, and this stuff. And she's also somebody, I think, she practices being truthful for the most part. So I basically told, I was using this opportunity to basically, tell her, and basically it's like, Mom, this applies to you, because you are somebody who thinks you are established in truth. And when you invoke these thoughts of, I'm suffering and I'm alone, I don't have this, I don't have this stuff, maybe that will really become a reality. So make sure that, you always feel abundant and feel like, express a sense of gratitude. And then she got scared, actually. For a moment, she was in a silence. And after a few seconds, she basically told me, it's like, Srinu, actually, I'm not 100% truthful. I also lie sometimes. So she didn't want the part to become a reality. That was very funny. So that was, I think, one of the things that I strongly recommend, particularly the kids or people around us. We always need to develop this, power of positive thinking, and then all the other things like what Savita ji said. It's not just about the thought. We need to concretize the thought with the finest of details, and then with it, and connect to the essence and the purpose, and then those thoughts are going to become a reality. And then the next one is another very interesting thing.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
Srinu. It took a long time for me to understand. We say positive thinking. In a time of crisis, it's hard to be positive. So I think that word is used very like everywhere, or do a positive thinking. I think it's more of get out of the thinking you have right now to something else. It doesn't have to be positive. It doesn't have to be negative either. Get into a neutral state first, and then maybe from there, see where you want to go, or movement of a body, or movement of eyes. Usually they say when you look up to the sky, usually, or any roof, the thought changes. So I think going to the neutral should be the first step.
I
Like
think
I'm thinking on.
This is a very good one. I mean, what you're suggesting is the different tactics, because sometimes we all get into a situations of distrust or the trial. The thing is, there are different techniques on how you can do it. But one of the biggest wiring that I started doing for myself, and in fact, it came as an article in I think New York Times, which is that we all need to interpret our life as telling the stories. For any situation where you go from point A to B, right? I think there are two types of mindsets, I believe. One is a prosperity mindset, and then the other prosperity mindset. The other one is poverty mindset. I believe the situations will always remain the same, but I think the people who are more resilient, people who are or with the growth mindset or stuff, they're always in any tribulation or situation, their attention is focused more on what they have in abundance versus what they lack. And then they're also interpreting their life stories always in any situation. They're always going from a situation of bad to good. It's exactly the same linear scale of the time of different situations. Some are good moments, some are bad moments. But apparently the people who are practicing this, they are telling the story from a point where they're always interpreting their life story from, they're always going from a low point to the high point, or a bad situation to the good point. Whereas other people, what they do is they are interpreting the exact same events from, they're going from a situation of good position to a bad situation. That's what referred to as a poverty mindset. So I believe it's just an interpretation. Like as an example, I mean, it's not like, I practice this, like, for example, if you lose a limb, or if something happened, or the COVID, situation that happened, a lot of people got into depression. But if you're only being more thankful for what we already have versus what we don't have, and that changes the perspective. But instead, a lot of people could not handle staying at home, and then that increased the depression and the domestic violence and so on and so forth. So I think, it's also this mindset of interpreting your life journey on whether you're always continuously going from a bad to good versus good to bad. I believe that is one of the mindsets. In fact, that kind of leads into the next one. What you suggested is there are different techniques. There are different techniques. Like, for example, like, if you lose a leg, you could interpret it as like, I lost one leg, or, you can shift this like, dude, I have, the greatest, I still have my, two hands and this and that, and then interpret life in a different way. But shift your awareness to where you have abundance versus keeping the awareness on the sense of lack, where what you don't have will lead to more misery and the poverty mindset. Does that make sense?
Yes. But I think technique is important. It's like,
Yeah,
when you
the tactics
start
are important.
cooking,
Yeah.
when you start cooking, your mom will say, "Oh, do this, or whatever it is," and then it doesn't turn out like that. And then she say, "Oh, you are supposed to add hing and this. Why didn't you tell me that?" It's just assumed that I should know those things. So
But
it's
this is,
like that.
yeah, yeah. Actually, all the things that are revealed in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, the practices that we are doing or the techniques, like for example, we talked about the obstacles, the 9 obstacles that can get into a trouble situation, and then the strategies to overcome, right? And then the eight limb system, or Kriya Yoga, that is a third stream of yoga that Patanjali revealed. All these are the techniques. I think some of these are like the sutra format, they're so terse. The real goal for us is how do we interpret them, and then how do we put them into our day-to-day action, the practice. That's when we strengthen that muscle. Otherwise, it's just a good, nice satsang, nice reading. But I think as we keep on practicing them, I think that's when it kind of solidifies within us. So the next one is Asteya Pratistha.
Can I just, I'm sorry, I'm just adding one thing here, because both the examples that you gave and I think Savita, she gave. So both have a very basic difference. The difference is in the case when we are thinking that something is missing, then that is the negative thinking. But the first case, like the Patanjali Yoga Sutras says that, whatever is there is abundance, like you have a lot and I'm not really missing it out too much. Like, don't think about what is missing, but think about what's available or what is there, and then build from there, whatever you can do next. So there is no need to go into the neutral stage of mind. If you think positive always, then it will be positive.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
Yeah,
I think
good point. And hey, sorry to interrupt, but I thought, that's a good example. And metaphorically, the way I would look at that situation is, a room is dark, right? There is darkness in the room. You cannot just take the darkness out. You can only fill in the light, right? So when you try to take out the darkness doing nothing else, it doesn't work. But how do you take out the darkness? By filling in the light. So how do we apply that practically is like, when something bad is going on, like, you try to feel better, force yourself to not feel bad, doesn't help. But you do something else to feel better, helps.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Kiran, actually, so last week we covered this. Vitarka bhadane pratipaksha bhavanam. When you are engaged in that negative thing, you have to invite an opposite emotion. If you try to rid of the negative thing, it only grows bigger. So what Patanjali revealed as the technique is, the thing that we need to practice is, I think Savita, I think that's what you're saying, shift your awareness to something else, right? But that's what Patanjali codified as Vitarka bhadane. When you're caught in any one of this anti-yama, anti-niyama situations, instead of trying to fight that emotion, pratipaksha bhavane, which is like invite an opposite emotion. Like, for example, I mean, that metaphor that you have is a beautiful one, which is when you're in a dark, and if you feel like there is dark, and the only thing is, as I said, you can only, instead of removing the darkness, you need to bring light. And the way that you can actually bring the light is, in fact, you can just close your eyes, and perhaps and you do the meditation, there is a bigger light that is going to shine. You connect to the real light that's within us, or get a candle, right? And in fact, and then what Surabhi said is, what did Patanjali say? Our true identity is actually Nitya Sucha Sukha Atma. We are nothing but the divine. So the any pain or afflictions that we have is only for this external projection. The real deal is, we're already there. Once we start going deeper into our practices, we actually connect to the real self, and whatever the things that we are worried about, that's tied to an ephemeral kind of objects. But the analogy that you use is beautiful, which is Vitarka bhadane pratipaksha bhavanam. The biggest technique that we need to do is, don't fight the negative stuff, bring more positive thoughts, right? And the next one is very, very powerful. Asteya pratisthayam sarvaratnopasthanam. So when you don't steal anything, whether it could be an idea or it could be somebody's property or anything that's not yours. When you establish yourself in non-stealing, don't take credit for anybody else's thoughts, then what happens is whatever you get unlimited, all the wealth in the world is going to come to you. And for that to be doing there, you need to be established in, feeling a sense of abundance. When you are in abundance, you don't need to go procure from anybody else. And when you have a sense of abundance, then the whole universe is going to, in fact, I call this as, it's going to, what is the right word I used to, it's like, it's going to con against you. It's going to con against you to give more stuff to you. And in fact, in Bhagavad Gita, there is a metaphor. The metaphor is if you look at ocean is already full of water. It's abundant water. But still all the rivers flow to the ocean. It's not like the ocean needs more water. So when we always start feeling a sense of abundance with what we have, always, need to be abundant with whatever is left. And the magic happens. And I've actually witnessed it, I've actually witnessed it to some extent. Then all the rivers start flowing to you. So asteya pratistayam sarvaratnopasthanam. And in fact, this is also what is mentioned in Carol Dweck's mindset book. She actually studied all the different types of people. And then one she categorizes as a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is also referred to as a prosperity mindset, where we always feel a sense of abundance. We actually look at challenges. In fact, when we get into a difficult situation, use that as an opportunity, use that as a training ground for you to build more resiliency. And they also believe that people who are in the growth mindset, they believe that there is no gift or blessing. Every skill can be developed and nurtured. It's not like, hey, can you actually, it's probably a tall order. Can Srini become a singer? This is a little bit of a difficult task, but, nevertheless, maybe someday. So that's what, Carol Dweck actually says, growth mindset, every skill can be developed and achieve mastery. It's possible for everybody. It's not like, some people are disadvantaged. Versus a poverty mindset, whenever there is a challenge, they feel like, kind of a defeatist mentality. And they believe that every obstacle becomes a barrier for them. And then they believe that, some skills cannot be developed, no effort, which is like some are only blessing. And then people cannot even take criticism. And in fact, people who are in the growth mindset, they thrive. They thrive in the criticism. In fact, my executive coach at Apple tells me the story of Michael Jordan. He used to apparently thrive when other people started bullying him. He was converting that criticism into a fuel to achieve bigger and better performance. And these are the powers that we have. So basically, what it actually summarizes is asteya pratistaya. When you have a sense of abundance, then the magically more stuff comes to you without you even far reaching out. Any thoughts? Isn't that the beautiful, the ocean and rivers kind of a metaphor?
Yep, that's amazing.
It's and in fact,
but in order to be in a growth mindset, I can only talk about my own journey and my own experience. Again, growth, you should have a growth mindset, think positive. It's like my daughter saying, oh, I'm bored. I can't say, okay, don't be bored, right? You have to give an order. Okay, you want to watch a TV? Do you want to do something? That's, you need to shift. So in the same way, I'm saying when you want to have that growth mindset, you have to take away the basic fear, Mooladhara Chakra fears. So without taking that away, you will be lingering in the same, the vicious circle, thinking, oh, I should think. I'm only talking about my own experience. Once I was able to shift my fear, where as I was watching something today, and Elon Musk mom said that when Elon Musk actually realized he can survive on a $1 a day and survive just by eating a ramen or whatever it is, he realized, oh, I can survive. And then that's when he started taking immense risk in life. So I think that the Mooladhara Chakra related fears has to be eradicated first in order to elevate your growth mindset. I mean, that's my 2 cents. Sorry.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think one thing that we are doing, I think this is probably where the mysticism is a good one. Or mysticism is like, the thing that I say is like, yes, you absolutely, it's like, the chakras need to be continuously flowing so that there is no blockages within. I think, what had happened is the more we introduce these chakras and this stuff, it probably is not connecting to a lot more people. I think, we just need to use more techniques and tactics that people can easily, put that into practice. And I'll simply say this, like give and take. I mean, I can relate to my situation. Until 2016, I was always used to be some kind of an insecurity about my kids and how they are going to grow and, what they're, I mean, I was always trying to be more and more protective, actually. In fact, there was the surrender was missing. And even devotion was so much, it's only to protect what I had. So protect what I had. I mean, perhaps, there is a conditioning that how we grew up and so on and so forth. But I think, some life sequences, changed my, it was like, where I literally had to go to the nadir. And then there is nothing more for me to lose. And then that actually opened another dimension. And when I felt like, and I did not have many things or in terms of the money and this stuff, and then I figured out like, there is no way. Then I started giving. I mean, I think my first thing was to Miracle Foundation, some orphanages, and then somehow we gave some $10,000. But I would be surprised. It's like after we started doing it, there more things started coming. I think whenever we are in this position of distress or this stuff, the only channel that we need to do is how can we help others? What can we give? And I think that's what they say, right? Give and take. I think we need to amplify our giving. And then the taking is going to happen. Universe is going to give back. And that's what is also the network effect. I think if we start focusing more on, I mean, I don't know if I have copyright or not. Even my older daughter, I mean, she does all the things, but somehow sometimes she feels she has some scarcity that she's not achieving more. But if she were to actually convert that into, it's like, and I'm already in more abundance. I think, the more things probably flow very naturally. But I think, all these techniques, I think it is absolutely critical. Life was very, very adventurous. We will be put to a lot of tests, this like the Kurukshetra battle, but every point in time, we just have to focus our awareness on what's abundant, what is left versus what we don't have. I think that's
actually, I have one very good experience that I can quickly share. And this is my lifelong experience. The experience is like, I'm not that fortunate person who could stay for long, like, for many, many years in one position, in one job. I was doing consulting and maybe, I didn't do full time. And then I had to keep on, but as soon as I started feeling like, this is the place I could really become full time or something, I came to know this project or something, I don't want to stay there. Like, it's not, I don't want, but maybe something, the situation was not going to work. So, and that was kind of a little bit unsettling for me. But then I challenged myself to look for better opportunities because I realized, oh no, this is not what I want to be stuck into because this is what I already done. Let me get into what is the next. And it helped me grow my confidence and every time got the better job. I mean, it's surprising, but I eventually, and I understood all the departments of even the organization when I was interviewing. So I was like, I getting the quality of a CEO, like I understand how this entire bank is functioning inside. So, I mean, with challenges come opportunities. So challenge itself is opportunity.
Actually, that's a fantastic thing. I think the lens that we need to put there is when you are looking for a better opportunity, right? There has to be, it has to be not rooted in a sense of lack, but rather you're willingly trying to put yourself outside of the comfort zone to actually push yourself. That's like a tapas, right?
I have done this thing. I don't have to stay to this thing. I mean, it's the time that, it's their calling that I should be moving on and doing the next step and all that. So otherwise I would be comfortably sitting there and, doing the same thing for many, many, many years. But I very strongly relate to that.
I think that's a beautiful thing. I think, we need to do it. I think, but it has to come from a sense of abundance and the confidence, and then you're willing to take on bigger adventures because that's what the universe calling is. Then the universe rewards yourself, because you're not waiting for the status quo and then settling into the dukkha dormanasya kind of a state. And I mean, recently, it's a small digression, but Satya Nadella, one of the interviews that he had with Salman Khan recently, he basically said, sometimes you have to find exuberance in mundane stuff. So that's another kind of a dimension. We need to be able to create exuberance in any situation. Then that there is no sense of boredom, actually. We can actually create a sense of exuberance in every situation. And it's just the perspective. And then you can also increase your capacity to do more and more things. Okay, I mean, I think we can actually share a lot of different dimensions to it, but the most important thing that I want to say is, Asti, let's all build a sense of abundance, and then let the universe create the magic where it actually flows more and more rivers of wealth towards us, right? And then we just need to build a perception to even understand the wealth that is flowing to us. I mean, look at it this way: how many people are joining this satsang and sharing all the dimensions? I mean, we probably never expected this, so that's beautiful. And then the next sutra is brahmacharya pratishtayam virya labdaha. We talked about it. Brahmacharya is engaging in brahmacharya to brahmacharya, always engaging in the journey, the contemplation of the Brahman. Brahman is Bruhat, which is like the higher thought. We are nothing but we are made to think really big, at the cosmos level. But most of the time in life, I think 95% or even far greater, actually, that's what Sri Ramji says. Our mind is involved in mundane, trivial thoughts, and we dissipate a lot of energy. And what the sutra says is, the higher the canvas of the contemplation that you engage in, the greater powers that you nurture, because all you're doing is you're dissipating that energy in mundane, trivial stuff, pursuing trivial and mundane stuff. So brahmacharya pratishtayam virya labdaha. So you will actually build all the virya. Virya is courage, confidence, happiness, all the dimensions of the courage and the strength that you need to include to chase bigger and bigger missions are going to be a result of brahmacharya. And the last one in the Yama principles is aparigrahasthairye janma kadanta sambodaha. I mean, this is perhaps a little bit more esoteric, but what it basically says, aparigraha is the sense of non-accumulation. I mean, we are always in this process, right? In this materialistic world, we're always trying to find our security in, I need to buy more land, I need to get more stuff, I need to buy stocks. We are always in this process of accumulating a piece of what's there in the Prakriti for ourselves, for our own asmita, for our own consumption, or for our own family being, thinking that our security is reposed in them. But we realize that the security is not there. I mean, if there is a COVID virus, none of these possessions actually do anything. The real security doesn't come from that. So, and like what Gandhi said, this planet has everything to satisfy everybody's need, but not greed. So we somehow are driven in this conditioning that accumulating more is a means of success. And that's a kind of a false sense of that's avidya. What it basically says is, people who are not continuously trying to go prosecute and accumulate more stuff, aparigraha sthairye, the real thing that you need to accumulate, which is like the janma katanta, the knowledge of your lifetimes, like the knowledge that you accumulated from all your previous life experience in the journey or the realization of the self, will actually be realized within you. So that's what it said. Now, of course, this thing is very difficult to practice. And if any of you practice this aparigraha, and if you reveal that siddhi within you, please share with us. But that's what Patanjali revealed. So this is kind of
everybody should read Marie Kondo, a book by Marie Kondo. The Art of Cleanliness, keeping it, the art of keeping it clean, or something like that. Yeah.
I think the minimalistic living has great powers, actually. In fact, in one of our annual conferences, I forgot the name of the speaker that we had. He literally said this statement, which is like, we all have to become zero before we become zero. I mean, that is that the journey to infinity. In fact, that's what we say in the 10, which is like, one has to consciously become zero to become one, or to become the infinite. But we are always in the journey of going the non-zero. We are trying to accumulate some stuff, but what we accumulate is ephemeral, right? Number one, none of them actually travel with you. Whereas the Janma Kadanta Sambodha, the real stuff that need to travel with you, transcending this costume, we are not procuring that. For that, we need to consciously try to become zero on your external possessions and ego and intellect and this stuff. One has to become zero to become infinite. So at some level, that's what the sutra is saying. Aparigrahastairya Janma Kadanta Sambodha. And that's what even Sadhguru says. If you want to own an identity, you become identityless. If you really want to become an identity, then you would have to own, like Aham Brahmasmi, own the identity of the Brahman. So that means we have to consciously obliterate the boundaries of who you are and then what you have, and you have to become zero. The journey to zero, so that you can. In fact, there is a Chinese game called Go. I interpret that as game of zero. You all have to, and God apparently asked all of us to play the game of Go, which is to become a game of zero. But we are trying to become non-zero, and then we are neither here nor there. We are like point something, something, something. So, but that's a game that we willingly choose to come and play. So that's kind of a little bit summary of the yama. I mean, do you think these make sense? How we conduct towards others?
Yes, absolutely.
Yep, and what said Jati Desha Kala Samayana Vichinna Sarvabhamama Pratham. I mean, these verbs transcend time, location, and the race. So now
I think in the modern world, it's more about than others. I think we torture ourselves with ahimsa, and we torture ourselves by saying lies to ourselves. We torture ourselves by stealing from our own happiness, and we don't detach easily, and we don't declutter, including people in our life, including experiences in our life as well. So I would say more than others, it's because I think with the quarantine, you're dealing with yourself here.
Yeah. Actually, that's a beautiful insight. Actually, separate put yourself as another person, right? That sense of objectivity, the witness mindset, and then don't commit violence on you as an entity, not the real you. Okay, that's actually a beautiful insight. So then
one more thing is about one more thing is about the stealing, right? So so we always do not have everything of our own. Many things we really get from somehow, even the thoughts that we have, we might read somewhere, we might listen to someone and stuff like that. So things are nothing is original, basically, that we are, whatever we are doing. So is it like sort of stealing? Because we are, and then we say it like, I know this thing. I mean, I feel like, when I'm explaining somebody, then I have to give that confidence. Okay, this is how I feel, or what I say, or I don't give all the reference, all the context, what was behind that.
Actually, that's what Bhagavad Gita says, right? Nama. Nama is Ma means mine. Nama. We need to approach everything that comes to us as we are the custodians, we are the stewards, right? It's not ours. There's nothing in this world that's ours. We're only temporary custodians of that thing that is, we're just guardians. That's it for the time being. But unfortunately, we don't connect it. That's what is asmita. And then the answer to that is we basically have to practice this nama. Ma is mine, nama, which is like, this is not mine, including our own body. About this body is not mine. This the mind is not mine. These possessions are not mine. But yet, we are just temporary guardians. I think that's the maintenance. I think what happens is whatever comes to us naturally through our regular efforts. We talk about the Kriya Yoga, Tapaswadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhani, or it's also one of the niyamas. I think we just need to let them come to us and then let be the temporary guardians for that, but don't be attached to them. And then that's when the suffering comes. And then don't try to go, get more either from parigraha or from steya, which is from the stealing. I think that's what probably it means. But
I think as long as we use it for the overall betterment of the world, I don't think it's a stealing. Like you're teaching us this knowledge. It's not like you're stealing from Patanjali and teaching us. You're actually
he's constantly referring. Patanjali has mentioned that, so it is not at all stealing.
No, that's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm just thinking out
this
loud.
is sharing. Basically, the beautiful thing is, Sadhguru defines this as Ishanga. Our entire journey is we have to prepare our vessel, like body and mind, so that the divine can express itself. We just need to prepare ourselves so that we can be the limb of the creator. Our only job is so the purification starts from within us, so that in fact, now I started using the word it to express the divine, no gender, right? We just, prepare our body and mind such that, and the environment such that, let it express itself through you. So you just become an Ishanga. I think that's kind of the culmination, right? So, but on that note, I think, one of the things that let me quickly introduce, and if we need more time. So one of the niyamas, the things that we need to practice for our own selves, this is like a self-hygiene, which is, there are 5 niyamas: Saucha, Santosha, Tapas, Swadhyaya, Ishwar Pranidhana. The Saucha is the most important one, which is the cleanliness. Cleanliness within our body, cleanliness within our mind, cleanliness around in the environment that we are in. No clutter, no impurities. That's what is the number one discipline that we need to practice for ourselves. And that's a niyama. And the powers, there is actually, the cleanliness has a lot of weight in the yoga sadhana. In fact, some of the first thing that, what the power that it releases, Saucha, Swanga Jugupsa, Pradi Asangarkhaha. What it means, Swanga Jugupsa, means we actually become detached to the body. I mean, it sounds a little bit counterintuitive. By keeping our body clean, we transcend the body. So most of the time, there's a thing, right? We are comfortably unhappy with our body. We are comfortably, it's just like, we are our body is not in a great thing, but we're somehow comfortable. And then we have all these external things to keep us cool, and, the thermostat that keeps us from 60 to 70, wherever you go. But you are not in a perfect, cleanliness within your body or the mind. But what it actually says is, people who maintain cleanliness within the body and the mind in the environment that they have, they eventually, the body doesn't disturb them. I mean, this is an interesting insight. I mean, just as a simple thing, right? People who, let's say, don't keep their body clean, this is a simple thing, right? Who do not, take shower or something. Then what happens? The body comes in the way. You smell bad, you do this. And what happens is, then you're always thinking about how to overcome that. You either, put perfume, or you're trying to, fix that, because the body is coming in the way of this stuff. And the same thing, some people, I think I mentioned this, some people, say that, hey, should I come the yoga practice? Should I actually, take shower before my yoga practice? I'm just like, just imagine if you don't come to because they don't want to take shower before and after. Or it's just like, just assume that yoga is there for you to go deeper and union with yourself. But if you're not clean within yourself, the body is going to come in the way of your own sadhana. And last week when I was with my younger daughter, the big change that I noticed, which I felt very happy, when she's trying to improve her concentration skills. But one of the things apparently she's experimenting with is, every time she's sitting for her homework or exam preparation, she makes sure that she takes shower, she wears nice clothes, and she feels, in a very nice ambience. And then that's when she does it. I was like, wow, this is a beautiful Patanjali kind of stuff. So I think any action that you're doing, if you approach it as like, this is like a devotion, a sense of offering to the God, then that means, we are going to keep ourselves pure and then the ambience pure. And that's how we act. Yogastha Kurkarmani. First, we keep ourselves clean and harmony and then act, not the other way around. So that's one of the benefits, which is Saucha Swanga Jugupsa. We transcend the body, even if the body is going through some pain or disease and so on and so forth. You don't get affected by it because you detach yourself from the body and the mind, because your mind is pure. And in fact, there is another Patanjali Yoga Sutra that comes a little bit later, which is like Tava Pratyayo Videhi Prakrutilayanam, or something. It's like you become Videhi, you become bodiless, or you transcend the body. And then Prakrutilayanam, that's when you are in tune with the nature and you have that intuition that's perfectly synchronized with the universe. I mean, in fact, we see these examples with Ramana Maharshi and Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, right? I believe, both of them had some kind of a cancerous abscess or something like that, but it never affected them, which is like, because they were not connected to it, because they were clean within their thoughts, clean in their environment, and they were maintaining their body in the other stuff. So, and then we'll continue this Saucha a little bit more, but cleanliness, actually, Patanjali gave a lot of weight to this practice, cleanliness, for the yogis. One is, he actually revealed, I think, 3 or 4 powers. One is samanatva, which is like, we'll be happy, we'll always be in the harmony. And then indriya control, we will also master the control over our senses. And then we'll also get the capacity to be uniting with the Atman. I think there are about 4 powers, which is samanatva, indriya jaya, and then atma darshana, which is like, where you will actually be prepared more to get closer to your self-realization. So let's wrap up for today. The big takeaways is the growth mindset, prosperity mindset. So feeling a sense of abundance and always engage in higher thoughts, not the mundane, trivial thoughts. That's the brahmacharya. Aparigraha, not try to accumulate more and more, and see if we can try to become the custodians. And the last one, the first one in the niyama, which is about the cleanliness, which is to practice the sense of cleanliness within our body and the mind and the environment. I think those are some of the fundamental things that we need to practice in our Ashtavangana. So that's for today. Any thoughts, comments from any of you? Would you agree with the Saucha?
The last one was, Samanatva. What were the 4 again? Can you please repeat?
So we'll briefly touch on that. One is, Ashuddhik Shaya. In other words, of course, by cleaning, you'll eliminate some of the impurities. Then Samanatva is, you'll be established in the balance, in the harmony. And then the third one, Indriya Jaya, and then the last one is Atma Darshana. So I think the cleanliness is actually is an important thing, which is, starts with the body and this body and stuff. I mean, the way I interpret it is absolutely, I was thinking about it, even if I don't take shower, that's when I need perfume. So because you're always thinking about what do we do, and you're always be conscious of your body. But eventually the body, we need to let the body get out of our way. And that's what cleanliness actually does. So let's wrap up for today. Any other thoughts? Kiran, yeah. Sunil ji, anything that you guys want to add?
Oh. Very good discussion. Yeah.
Oh, Guruji, Ramakanth ji, many happy returns of the day.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So to add to the shower water thing, right? I'm not sure that technically what happens, but maybe because we are 70% water, it's so amazing. As soon as the water falls on the body, this doesn't even, I'm talking about not even needing any soap or any, that kind of thing. Just a shower of water on the body takes me into zero state, just like that. Right? So there is I mean, of course, I do not know. I really need to check more deeper. I know, in spite of knowing Ayurveda completely or even yoga or whatever, but it's so fascinating for me to see just a splash of even ablutions throughout the day, right? So just whenever I take a face wash, boom, right there, my prana from the left and the right nostrils become samana, just equal. And when you sit in meditation, the way the palms become warm and you feel that relaxation. The same thing happens when just a small splash of water is done on the face. It really astonishes me. And shower, don't even need to ask. Like, it's like so amazing. Going to the zero state as if we are born fresh.
Actually, Ramakanji, whatever the beautiful, I mean, the other big thing is with the shower. And what I realized is, I mean, we now invented all the comforts about the hot water and the cold water. But in the early morning, when you take a cold shower, like the natural state of the water, I mean, I cannot explain how rejuvenating it is, even in the perfect winter. It's just, I think, what we are doing is we are actually becoming more comfort to discomforts of the body. And then what happens is we are becoming more enslaved in the body. You only need hot water, you need this. Now they're all become obstacles in our practice.
Excess
So,
winter is not considered as winter.
I see. I think
We are Canadians here. I think you should experience that. No, but I do agree.
But that's a homework for all of us. Maybe we should start practicing taking cold showers in the morning.
Yeah, so I just to add to that, right? Looking at this gentleman Wim Hof, and last so many years, like since I'm born, I have never so scared of cold showers, and especially after learning about Ayurveda, me being partially Vata body and so on, I was totally avoiding this coldness, right? But after experimenting with this gentleman Wim Hof, starting to take cold showers since probably 2 months, right? Totally changed the dimension. I mean, I'm so shocked the way your body responds. And the whole sadhana, I have never realized that. Maybe now I know that, okay, yes, last 30 years I have been into this pranayama sadhana or meditation, so called. Right? I was so shocked that during we had this ice, that 1 week of no power and all, right?
Texas winter.
I was taking cold showers and it's totally out of the world, honestly.
Actually, that was
like to read more or so on. I think even Sriniji can share that link or I can post it out. But I'm so surprised the rejuvenating factors it has and how the vagus nerve, the longest nerve in the body, part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is nothing but the rest and digest aspect of it, and how the brown fat in the body, because looks like, I never knew about it technically, basically. So the kids, they have a very high brown fat, and as we grow up, it's all the white fat that we grow, we heard. And once we start doing this showers, cold showers, the brown fat gets increased again. So it was pretty astonishing. But anyway, I don't want to hijack the call.
That's a big thing. Basically, it's like, let's not introduce more comforts, as external comforts to our body. Then you are actually becoming more enslaved. So the best part is like, keep your body and mind clean with your natural, state of the thing. So you become less and less enslaved. So then what happens, when you need to go to some practice, you need, all these comforts. Do you have hot water? Do you have this? Do you have this temperature? Do you have this stuff? So then you are becoming more and more enslaved in the body. The thing is, just keep it clean with as natural effort as possible. And then our goal is to transcend the body. And I think Tava Pratyayo Deva, Videhi Prakriti Layanam. I think that's when we are in sync with the nature. So with that, I also wanted to briefly do one meditation, which we tried last week, which is tied to one of the Yoga Sutras, which is to anchor our amplification of one sensory perception to bring our mind into an equanimous state, which is Vishayavativa Pravattirutpanna Manasani Bandanaha. So we tried that a little bit, I think last Tuesday. where we wanted to amplify the sense of hearing to bring our mind into an equanimous state. That's a beautiful insight from Patanjali. Perhaps we'll do that in our next session. Thank you so much for the satsang and sharing all your insights and the collaboration. We're all sharing our experiences together. So let's conclude with chanting of 3 Om, and then we'll wrap it for today. Everybody, keep your spine erect. Take a deep breath. Everybody, shift your awareness to the silence after the Om. Last one. The silence after the Om is the Turiyam, which is the pervasive conscious state. That's who we are. The final chant. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramayah Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sabha cup of rice to transmit this divine knowledge, to give us the right version. Divyam Dadati Me Chakshu. And slowly, gently, at your own pace, with your bright smile, open your eyes. Thank you all for sharing your yoga sadhana with me, and then have a wonderful evening. We'll see you again on Saturday. Good night.
Thank you.